Good afternoon to you. My name is Harder2000 and today I am joined by the one, the only JOENN. JOENN, it's a massive honor to have you with me today. vEMOTION is an album that I'm really passionate about, and I hope that this interview offers some new insights into the album, but also introduces more people to it. But before we start, could you perhaps introduce yourself to anyone who might be listening in?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, this is JOENN. I originally was under my alias DJ Joe, and this is my offshoot for doing original music and collaborating with a lot of virtual singers, all that kind of stuff. And with the JOENN project, I wanted to kind of dive more into songwriting, since I've been making remixes and arrangements for more than 10 years. I felt like I've had enough time to kind of make music to be at a point to where I could start tackling stuff 100% original. And yeah, with this whole project, it's all a bunch of passion project stuff, and everything is I'm trying to drive emotion with everything I do with my production, and always trying to hit hard with the synth production, and I think I just kind of wear my emotions on my sleeve with everything I put out with JOENN. So yeah, that's me.
Alrighty. I know you've already told the story numerous times before, but how did you get your started to producing and DJing overall? Have there been any particular artists that inspired you to start?
So I think I'm trying to remember a long time ago, around 2000, I want to say 2008. I think around the time, EDM and Skrillex's rise to dubstep was kind of in its early stages. And, artists like Deadmau5, Porter Robinson, Skrillex, that era, the early era of EDM. The introduction to that kind of aggressive electronic music was something I was super interested in at the time, and that kind of introduced me to the idea of that kind of music, and at the time I was already playing a bunch of Flash games and listening to music on the website Newgrounds. And what actually started to push me to make music was the audio forum community there, where you can kind of post your songs in certain threads and ask for feedback and stuff like that. But the main thing that kind of pushed my passion was back in the day on the Newgrounds, there was I think it was the best songs, top 5 best songs of the week. And when you pressed on the audio portal to listen to music, one of the top 5 songs would play automatically. And at the time I was like, oh, that would be sick if I heard one of my songs on there, At the time I had kind of a small introduction of playing the piano and stuff, just basic kind of music knowledge, because my parents kind of put me, my sister, and my brother into piano lessons. So we had this early introduction to playing music. So I was interested in trying to see if I can produce it and maybe try to get on that top 5. And that kind of pushed me to start to look into how to make electronic music. And at the time I was inspired by a lot of the music I heard in the Flash games as well. So I took my inspirations from what I've heard there, and eventually combined it with stuff I liked with the EDM scene, and it kind of flourished from there. And it kind of all started based off of that'd be really cool if I can do something here. And then I found a passion into making music in general after having that initial push to start. So, and I just kept going from there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know it's a period when a whole lot of artists were learning to grow a community via the internet or something, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. What's your production workflow? How do you usually come up with an idea for a song and build upon it? And is the particular workflow for vEMOTION different from your other work?
Okay. So when it came to vEMOTION, it wasn't really too much of a different workflow than I usually go from. when I make original music, but usually it starts out with an idea in my head, like either a melody line. Most of the time it's a melody line, but sometimes it's like a drop idea. So, for example, let's take this song. Hold on a second. One of the songs of the album. Let's do this one. Okay, one of the songs of the album, I actually heard it was kind of like a chill house pop song while I was while I was eating at a local dumpling restaurant, and the music they were playing there was all like chill house music or just progressive house music. And one of the songs came up and was like, oh, this is super catchy. And I looked the song up and I'm like, ooh, I'd like to make something similar to this and try to capture that similar vibe. And from there, I started with the vibe. And made a melody line from it, and then I wrote music and lyrics from there. And usually everything, whenever I start a song, it comes from an initial idea, whether it comes from an existing song, something catchy I heard, or just something that randomly came into my head. And yeah, so usually whenever I start from scratch, it's always from an initial melody line, and then I build off from there. And then usually whenever I start building it off, I'm like, okay, I don't want to go too crazy with this. What's the tempo of this song? What's the genre? And I try to keep the rest of the song within the certain ideas, and then flourish from there. And kind of like, let's say this idea of a melody line was like, oh, this is around 150 BPM or something like that. I'd probably want to look to make like a dubstep song or a trap song or a future-based song, because 150 BPM kind of resides in those kind of genres. But I usually try, and then I kind of base everything off and just kind of go by the vibe from there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So basically it's just like coming up with basically just one of the most memorable sections. Basically, it's like a lot of songs are defined by their melody, right?
Yes.
Yes. Nice. And I actually did my research for this one. That dumpling restaurant story, you heard Sweet Release by New Westpac, and that's how Can't Move On came to be, right?
Yes, it was actually Can't Move On, yeah.
Okay, so the two JOENN albums we have so far, nearly all the songs have VTubers vocals, and you've also worked with plenty under the DJ Joe alias. What made you first interested in VTubers in particular, and how did you end up falling in love with them?
Let's see. So I think I want to say my first, well, honestly, the first introduction to VTubers I ever had was actually Kizuna a long time ago when she was first kind of going viral. And I thought it was really fun, really quirky. And it kind of, I didn't look too deep into it. And mostly just watch Kizuna videos because it was really a fun thing to watch. But it wasn't until the Mori Calliope song contest and the introduction of the first EN wave for Hololive is when I really started getting more into it. Prior to that, I think the main thing that pushed me into VTubers was the Hololive talents. I think it was probably, I want to say, it was either Okayu or Suisei. It was one of the two, because I love seeing the Suisei Tetris stuff. That stuff is really good, and that's not even mentioning the music, but just the Suisei as a streamer is really awesome. And Okayu and how she streams, and those really long game streams, and her energy is just great. Back in the day, that's kind of what pushed me into getting started into VTuber, but it wasn't really until the first gen of Hololive EN where I kind of really dove further into it. I'd say like I'd want to say like it wasn't until I went into the first wave. I know it was either 2020 or 2021 when the first wave of VN came out, but I think that it was around then I really started diving into it. So Whole Life is kind of to blame for all the VTuber stuff I'm in now.
Yeah, so basically you're just like a day one, in a sense.
In a sense, yeah.
In a sense, yeah. But I'm like, that's fair. I'm like, I'd say Hololive English, the first gen was also my introduction to VTubers, but I didn't really like fully get into DEMONDICE, so I started like watching indie VTubers on Twitch last year. Yeah, and that's like something that really connected with me and also what inspired me to start myself. Yeah, and and how did you like end up just going like, I want to specifically collab with mostly VTubers for the JOENN alias?
How did I specifically get on that idea? That's a good question. It's mostly, how do I want to say this? The idea of just doing VTubers. Well, a lot of the that comes with just I love the aesthetic of the medium, and in general, there's a lot of talent within VTubers and voices as well, and singing. That I feel like there hasn't been too much representation of kind of singing over the EDM genre in VTubers, in a way, not necessarily like electronic music, but more on kind of like the aggressive EDM side of it. Because there's plenty of like VTuber pop songs that are electronic in nature, like the house song or something like that. But I wanted to kind of try to lean a little bit more towards that aggressive EDM sound, but not dive too deep into it. I don't want to make a full album of just straight like hard dubstep. I want to try to make something more melodic, something more catchier, but then have that drop in there within the song. You know what I mean? To kind of, because my passion in music production is kind of that harder EDM sound. I wanted to try to kind of get a little bit more representation of the progressive EDM in the VTuber scene, so I thought this was a cool way to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I'd say your music has become like this platform for like VTubers to try music that hasn't really been done before, because like when you look at the VTuber music scene, whole lot of J-pop, whole lot of hardcore stuff, tempo, fast-paced kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm like, it's really cool that you provide the opportunities for them to just like sing on songs that how do I say this, like electronic songs that will be memorable in raves and all that, but also making space for emotion. And speaking of making space for emotion, you mentioned that not only did Porter Robinson not only was Porter Robinson a massive influence for your DJing, but the World's album, you said it made you fall in love with dramatic storytelling, and that's like what you based vEMOTION off of. What particular aspects or songs or anything of the World's album just like made you realize that music can tell some really wonderful and fantastic stories? Like any highlights?
I see. So the World's album, I think, so when I first discovered Porter Robinson's World's album, it was kind of, I remember falling in love with the album when I first listened to it, but it wasn't until I saw Porter Robinson live when he played the album on tour is when it really changed my entire career and what I wanted to do with my music. Because at the time I was in New York, and I haven't actually been to like an EDM show at the time, because I've kind of just been like a bedroom producer my whole life, and I didn't really go out to shows too much, and I was trying to do more with life and trying to see more things. So I'm like, hey, why not try this, see how Porter Robinson is like live, because I really like his album. And I took the chance, and what Porter Robinson did with the album and how he changed the songs live kind of really made me fall in love with it a lot more, because the live versions of a lot of the songs in the album kind of they're a lot longer, they're a lot more dramatic, they're very different in certain aspects, and it kind of pushes the edginess that he initially brought to the album to like max with the visuals and the different arrangements, and experiencing it live it kind of has a different energy in general, and there were so many parts of that show that was like, oh my god, I want to make something like this to kind of give other people the same feelings that I'm feeling, that Porter is able to kind of build by himself, with his team, and yeah, it made me like reevaluate how I want to make my music after that, because I wanted to recreate the same feelings I got during that show. It was just like the dramatics of everything that he does, and so one of the main songs on the album was that kind of really left an impact on me in terms of like storytelling, was definitely Goodbye to a World, the closer song of the World's album. And it's about how like you like it's kind of like that bittersweet ending thing, and that song and a lot of other songs on the album have always this kind of like bittersweet feeling to it, and kind of there's this overarching like dread but hope, that like something like finding hope or trying to be happy in like a dark situation, like all these different like polar opposites, and like the edginess and the drama of it is kind of what really like drives me to like the album even more, and that's kind of I like that kind of energy, so I bring that kind of stuff from there into my work and everything I do. So yeah, at the time when I first discovered Porter Robinson, like I was kind of figuring out my sound, and then when I heard him, I'm like, okay, I want to do something like this, and that kind of thing has kind of always been with me ever since today. And now that I'm actually making original music, I can really showcase some of those feelings and those desires to make that kind of sound in my original work, and kind of like push that forward. So it's a really nice chance to be able to do that with JOENN and the vEMOTION album. So yeah.
Goodbye to World. Yes, Goodbye to a World is absolutely fantastic. That's like the first Porter Robinson I've actually heard also.
Nice.
You mentioned about this progression, these conflicting feelings, and how they just build up over the song's runtime. And yeah, it's an amazing closer to the album. I should also mention I managed to visit the World's album like somewhere in December or January, and another highlight, I don't know if you connect with this one as much, but Sea of Voices, that's just really I'm like, Porter is indeed like a different electronic musician in a way, and yeah, as you mentioned, his live performances really allow him to like flesh out his songs. I should go listen to his live album after this.
It's different.
Yeah. But yeah, I can see how that like really influenced the sentiment and drama of vEMOTION. Even like with all these upbeat sounds, you've created something that pours out your heart, I guess. I'd say, yeah. But yeah, before we go to vEMOTION, we're just like gonna take a real quick look at the album that came before it, vENERGY, because the difference is pretty noticeable. That you said, pardon me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned in like a live stream or Q&A or something that vENERGY is like a low stakes thing, just for you to try things out under the JOENN alias. Is that correct?
Yeah, vENERGY was more of a it was half a test on myself to see if I can do original music, because it was kind of like my first really big project, and just diving head first into making something completely original. So I didn't want to lay myself thin, I guess, because prior to vENERGY, I did try to write a concept album, and I got too caught up in trying to build the world that I never even finished a song. So like having that first experience of trying to make a really big, complex project, I was like, okay, I don't want to overwhelm myself with something, as dramatic or something as big as like vEMOTION. I wanted to like, okay, I just want to make music, make a song and like start it, end it, and just see how far I can go with that and see what kind of music I make, to see how comfortable I am with making original music. So I took vENERGY as a way to kind of showcase the fact that I can make, original music. And then as I was starting to make the sounds, like, okay, I like to make house music. Let's just make a house album. And at the time, I was really into kind of the more EDM, kind of like main stage kind of sound that you would hear at like EDM festivals. And I haven't really made something as like a lot of my music before that, kind of DJ Joe stuff, have been, just kind of strict remixes. Like, it follows the structure of verse, chorus, verse, bridge, and then there's a drop or something like that. And I wanted to kind of dive more strictly into that EDM structure, to where it's more kind of like, there's a hook in the beginning, and then there's a build up, and there's a drop, and then there's a breakdown, a hook, build up, drop. Something more of an EDM format instead of a songwriter format I've been doing. So I kind of took that first project as something like, okay, if I want to do something that can make original music but not go too far, we can do an EDM structure. And I kind of went from there, and it turned out really nice. I really enjoyed that project a lot, and I'm willing to kind of revisit more of that EDM-centered sound in the future, because with vEMOTION, it was more songwriter-centered, but I still want to have those drops, because I still love that hard EDM, So yeah, vENERGY was definitely a really fun time.
Yeah, that's completely fair. It's usually the debut album is just for like testing the waters. No one makes a Mac demo, but it's just like directly at the beginning. And yeah, it's interesting how you point out the EDM structures that you want to experiment, because you've got like these songs that have multiple genres in one. Like, for example, Yura Tonight goes from bass house, and then bam, it just hits you with this intense dubstep drop near the end. But there's like what should I call it? Sort of an anomaly in the track list, and it's an interesting one because it also happened to inspire the vEMOTION album as a whole. And that song is the 7-track third single, You're the Only One, featuring Shiki Miyoshino, because like suddenly you've got these lyrics about a troubled relationship, and yeah, it definitely aims for more of a certain theme rather than the carefree lyrics of the rest of the album. How did this particular song and its theme come to fruition?
So with You're the Only One, by the time I was working on that song, most of the album was kind of like, a lot of the songs on the album were kind of in their basically when I started working on the song, most of the album, I want to say maybe 60 to 70% of the album was kind of not necessarily finished, but like a lot of the demos were done. So like a lot of the lyrics were written, the themes were established for a lot of the songs. When I was like the track list, I was like, okay, I have a song like this, I have this song, talk about this, that kind of similar. And I was like, okay, let's try to, let's try to make still make a house song, but let's try to talk about something else and have something a little bit darker, because I feel like there's a lot of, because like I want to in this album, I want to not just make party songs. I want to have a little bit more variety in the lyrics, what I can write. So I was like, okay, let's try something more on the edgier side. And in general, I found that I really like to write about kind of like relationship stuff. It's because it's a lot of when it comes to like relationships. Obviously, there's a lot of emotion and drama that can happen within there, and that's one of my favorite. Drama and emotions is always one of my favorite things to write about. So I'm like, okay, so let's try to write about that. And that's so the reason why I made the song was because I felt like at the time I had never really wrote things like that. So it was kind of also an experiment for me to be like, okay, I know that I like it was an experiment for me to write something like that, because at the time I haven't written like a relationship focused song. So it was one, I wrote as kind of like a challenge to myself, and two, I wrote it to kind of diversify the album, since it was mostly just kind of party music, and I wanted to do a little more. Yeah, You're the Only One ended up doing like really, really well on the album, and it ended up being one of my favorite songs to write in general during that era. And yeah, it's definitely a standout on the album for me as well. So yeah, it's a good highlight. And from also that song kind of the success of that song also showed me that people still like the edginess. So I was like, okay, let's for the next project I want to keep that edginess, and that's kind of where I started brainstorming the emotion from that song. So yeah,
it is indeed a highlight. It just like really comes through with people sometimes just like wanna seek out that emotion, especially since like it's not like too much explored in electronic music. That's why people go to like that's why there are a lot of people who like Porter Robinson and other emotional acts, like say I don't know if you know them, but like Odessa, for instance. Yes, and well, it's a moment we've been waiting for. vEMOTION, the album itself. And so with this album, you keep on saying that this is a concept album. It's meant to be listened front to back in the order you've created, and it's got an underlying story. I do have like a personal theory of what the story is, but I want to ask you, do you have like a real fully plotted out detailed story for vEMOTION in mind, or do you just have like a simple loose outline based on the track order? And if you're okay with this, could you perhaps tell us what the story is?
Gotcha. So for vEMOTION, when it came to creating it, I kind of when I first started making the songs for it, I wanted to I wasn't exactly sure what the story was going to be, but as I started making the first few singles, I was like, okay, maybe I could actually, I started to kind of, when I was writing music, it was mostly about, okay, I want to kind of write something similar to You're the Only One. And I was making like test songs and stuff, and like, okay. And I started making more music and kind of finding different things to write about. And I was like, oh, wait a second, I could probably connect these with this song, and then okay, I can make another song to connect those with this song. And as I was making music, I was like, okay, wait a second, I could probably make a bigger narrative around these current songs. So the way it kind of happened was I just started making similar songs with that edgy theme of You're the Only One, and I just, from making those songs, I kind of gained more and more ideas, and eventually something just kind of hit, oh wait a second, we can make it, we can make a disaster song here, and then while they're doing this argument, we can make it so that there's the meteor about to hit Earth or something like that, or something's happening to where they're going to have to question their existence and why they were arguing in the first place, and then the whole thing goes on and on. But anyways, so for vEMOTION, okay, let's see. So the song "Emotion" kind of sums up all the songs before that, and then all the songs after "Emotion" happen. I kind of explain what happens like prior to that. So basically, the album kind of tells a story of kind of like two people who kind of have a relationship with each other who kind of is very divisive, and they're always like on and off, and then after like a big argument, someone runs away, saying like, I'm never to come back again, and they kind of regret it, and then there's like some kind of disaster that happens on Earth, and it kind of makes them question, you know, should I have done that? You know, like would it be better to have, you know, it makes them question, you know, what their priorities are in life, and then at the end, before everything kind of goes to shit, for lack of a better term, they go back, and we don't know if they made up and they got back together again, or if they came back together because, you know, it's better to just be with someone at the end of the world rather than just be alone, whether or not, you know, it's romantic or not, or whether you just want to be there for them. And you know, at the end of the story, we don't know what happens. But do they all die? Maybe they do. Do they find an escape? Maybe they do. But that's just kind of the ideas where I was going from when I was making these songs. It's kind of like there's a really big, so their whole world right now is just the fight between them two, and then something happens, you know, at a macro level, and it kind of questions like, okay, should I have not been too much in my head about this? I have truly figured out what I want, and something, you know, and then that forces them to realize what they want, and then the album ends, and it's like, okay, what did they end up doing, you know what I mean? So those were the kind of messages that I wanted to send with the album, with vEMOTION. It could be a little bit more, it's not necessarily too direct in the storytelling, but I feel like I wanted to make emotion in there, the song Emotion, to kind of like, okay, this is what's happening. And, you know, that's just kind of what I was thinking when I was making the album. And I know that other people that I've seen comments on, and they have a different story on. And I remember one of the posts one of the songs I posted when I was posting the singular videos on JOENN, I kind of talked about the song itself on Twitter, and I remember receiving a comment. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't know. They said that, oh, I didn't know this song was about that, and kind of it changed their narrative and what they thought the album was about. And I always love seeing things like that because, you know, whenever you make something, you always have a vision for it, but other people can also have different visions of their own that they personally think about it, and having that, everyone having a different connection with something you made is always really special, you know. So it's always really cool to see other people's takes on the album, and I don't want to say what, you know, no one is wrong in what they think the album's about, because at the end of the day, it's what your connection to the music is, you know. So yeah, so that's kind of what I was going through when I was making the album.
Yeah, that was 90% of what I thought the storyline was about. And yeah, I was like one of the people that commented on Twitter when you mentioned the apocalypse and like the everything will be alright Twitter post, because like that just like completely recontextualized the song for me, because I had not noticed when I first listened to it. Yeah, but it is a pretty ambitious project. Storyline's pretty kind of simple, but the way you execute it, it's just like really fleshes out these simple ideas into something more enticing, something more exciting, you know. And yeah, but okay, so just like with vENERGY, there's an original character on like the album cover and promotional material. The vENERGY one was named Myra, this one was called Now, because like it got me thinking. The first album, vENERGY, throughout vENERGY's promotion, Myra just like appeared as this dancing figure in the lyric video and the tiny set, but this album has a full-on story. So may I ask, who is Now? Is she like an actual character, like a main character in the story, or is she just like Myra and a mascot to associate with the vEMOTION album?
Alright, so Now is they're mostly Now is mostly like a mascot for the album, not necessarily kind of like the main character, as but at the same time I kind of I don't know, I mainly made Now mostly just as kind of like for the aesthetic of the album, not necessarily as this is who the main character is. But it's always nice to have that character there as a reference for other people too. At the same time, you can kind of say that they could be the main character, but the initial creation of Now was mostly kind of like the mascot of it. But I after making it, I was thinking it's kind of nice to have an imagery for Now to be like a person. Like whenever you see like an album cover, you and you're listening to something, you always gotta look at it. You know what I mean? So I also kept in mind like I like having them kind of be a little androgynous as well, to be like, okay, they can be kind of nondescript in a way, to where you can kind of like try to you know the thing they do in like isekais where they make the main character just kind of plain so that you can kind of put yourself in there. I kind of had that kind of thought going on with Now's design, putting that in there, but at the same time I didn't want to make it like, okay, this is the main person in the story, you know. I just kind of wanted to have them be kind of like an image to think about as you're listening to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So basically, it's just up to our interpretation, but but the intention is mainly for the aesthetic. And Lynn, correct, if that's their name, did a really fantastic job with this design. It's got a really cool outfit that's like more sleek and futuristic compared to Myra's in vENERGY. And yeah, while we're on the topic of the album's visuals, aside from Now, there's also like this futuristic design for the album. Like you've got the marble background behind Now and the VTubers, and also the digital graphs under the album and song names and all that. And these were designed by Tomo Ariga. Thanks. So when you were like commissioning him or something, did you like have any specific plans for what you wanted the album to look like, or was this just like something that Tomo came up with themselves?
So initially, when I was trying to go about the theming for the album, I was talking to Domo, and when I was talking to Domo while I was making the first couple of songs for the album. And one of the things, I was kind of on the fence between, when I was making the songs, I was on the fence between wanting to make an album strictly kind of like electronic, more electronic based, like with the songwriting and the melody line stuff, or doing something that's very kind of like emo era, 2000s, like My Chemical Romance era type, like melody lines and kind of things, like things they would talk about and how they would talk about it, that kind of aesthetic instead. And I ended up doing something in the middle, doing some songs kind of more towards that emo aesthetic, and other songs more towards like a dramatic, like an edgy EDM aesthetic, a kind of a combination of both of those ideas. And because I was trying to lean more towards like an emo rock thing, you don't have the idea to do something more of like a kind of a Y2K type thing, but have kind of like a, what's the word? Kind of like a, it was almost going to be kind of like an emo aesthetic for the theming of it. And I wanted to introduce more of kind of a futuristic thing to it, because like later I wanted to try to do like more of a futuristic theming as I started kind of getting the feel for what kind of story I wanted to tell. Because whenever I think about kind of like an apocalypse, I always think about like escaping to space or something like that. And in general, I've always kind of liked that future aesthetic. And like, you know, like super like white and electronic and stuff like that. I've always kind of admired that aesthetic in general. So I wanted to kind of like take from that futuristic aesthetic and combine it with the emo aesthetic for like the theming. And Domo was able to create something really cool of a combo of both. So yeah, basically I just kind of talked back and forth with Domo, and he gave me some examples of this. I'm like, okay, can we do more of this? So it was more of a thing we worked back and forth together so he could create something that kind of satisfied what I wanted to tell with the storytelling. So yeah, it was a really cool process working with him, it ended up working. It ended up turning out really, really cool, and a lot of the work was done from Domo, and a lot of the ideas he put forth. I was like, okay, that's a really good idea. So yeah, Domo is a really cool guy, and he also did all the artwork for vENERGY as well. So he just really believed in the vision and just wanted to help me out with it. So he was a really good guy and helped make the whole thing come to life. So it was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. He also did like a really good job on this. Before we move on, you brought up Porter's live concerts earlier and how that really inspired you to aim for emotion in music. And you know how he's been on his Smile World Tour a few years ago, right? He still DJs from now and then, but his concert setup for that and say Nurture and Worlds, those tours have been something different. He's actually playing with these synths, these instruments, and there's even a band. Do you perhaps have any plans to hold any concerts just like that for vEMOTION?
For vEMOTION, I currently don't necessarily have any concrete plans for a tour or anything like that, but I do have a show coming up that will probably be announced soon-ish, in that show I'll definitely be playing a lot of vEMOTION stuff, but I'll also be playing a bunch of stuff from a new project that's going to be coming out in October, so that's going to be really cool. So yeah, not necessarily don't have any
album, right?
Yeah, new album actually. It's not a mini album anymore. It's a full-fledged.
Oh, it's not a mini album anymore. Oh, dang.
Yeah. So that's gonna be awesome.
Heard it here first.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
That's gonna be sick.
Okay. Before we move on to the songs, I would just like to ask you, do you have any particular favorite small moments or sounds or instruments or lyrics from the whole album? You can name multiple if you can't just decide on one.
Gotcha. Moments. Let's see. One of my favorite, definitely the closer of the album is probably it's probably my favorite of the album. When I was making that song, one of the main inspirations for that song was actually Porter Robinson's mashup of Avril Lavigne's "The Damn Cold Night" that he did on his I forget what live stream he DJ'd on, but he combined that song with
Easier to Love You, right?
I think it's Language. He did a mashup of the Avril Lavigne song in Language, and that because sound where it's 6/8 timing and just big saws. I really wanted to make something similar to that. And the kind of the gradual build up from just the piano and the drums all the way to the end, where the big synth, the lead solo came there. It's just one of my favorite songs on the album. And of course that ending section, the lead solo comes in. That was definitely inspired by what was that song on Porter's newest album?
You said it was Easier to Love You. Is that correct? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's some of my favorite parts of the album for sure.
Nice. Yeah. I'm it is a beautiful closer. It's just so acoustic and calm in contrast to the previous 10 songs, and then you've just got this really cathartic lead synth solo that's just also really beautiful. All right. So now what we're gonna spend a lot of time going I'm gonna like spend a lot of time asking about like song by song, track by track. So we're gonna be here for a while. If you suddenly have to go in the middle of this, you can let me know. This is because there's like a lot to go through. And yeah, there will be focused questions for most of these, but I kind of wanna like give you the freedom to just like talk as much as you like about these songs. And like before we continue to the next song, I'm gonna ask you over and over again if you're ready to continue. If you have like anything else you wanna add, you okay with that?
Yeah, that works. All
right. So let's get started. The first song, Let Go Feel Everything with Yura Rikudou. You mentioned that this was meant to bridge the vENERGY style into vEMOTIONs, and with that in mind, these lyrics like "Talk to me honestly" and "All I wanted was for us to be happy," they kind of like read like foreshadowing of the themes this album's going to cover. Like it's gonna talk about love, it's gonna talk about heartbreak, and it got to the point where "All I wanted was for us to be happy" is an actual line in Emotion. And correct me if I'm wrong, was this like one of the last songs you made in the process? Is that correct?
For Let Go Feel Everything, yes. When it comes to intro songs, it was kind of the same process I went through with vENERGY, as the intro song to vENERGY was also one of the last songs I made as well. To kind of because at that point when I made the intro songs for both of the albums, I was at the point to where most of the album's themes were kind of set in stone and everything was kind of almost done. So I was able once I had a vision kind of there, I'm able to pick and choose from things that I want as the intro song. So writing a song like this, I didn't want to say too much, but I wanted to be able to convey what the album was going to be about through the little words that are in it. And also I did that on purpose because I also wrote a song at the time. I have a wrote song that was more reliant on longer notes and just like lesser lyrics, so you kind of feel each word harder. And it was a kind of a test to myself. Okay, I want to make another intro song like the first album, but I want to use less words so they give them more impact. And then I could with the whole, I wanted to also in the song, I wanted to eventually have some of these words be reused to kind of reinforce that being the theme of it. So I was really careful into trying to see what words I wanted to put into this song to kind of set forth the feeling of what the album was trying to tell. So yeah. I'm also, in general, I'm a big fan of like I'm a big fan of like overture songs where it's like you have like different melodies and stuff, or just different words or something to set up the entire album as the first song. I was a really big fan of that kind of concept. So I wanted to put that into this album specifically because, it is a concept album, and those songs like that kind of work really well for that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, overtures are pretty cool. And since you brought it up, it actually reminds me of another artist. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but there's this artist called AJR that like half of their albums start with like an overture that just smashes in these random instruments and random voice lines from the rest of the songs on each album. Again, I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
I actually have heard of AJR, and a lot of the inspiration for that kind of thing came from them as well. So it's funny how you mentioned them. So because I do know what they do, and I am inspired by that too.
Hell yeah! But yeah, so basically, what you're saying is that the foreshadowing of the whole album, it is true and it is intentional, right? With these lyrics, and yeah. All right. And before you like start singing, there's like this whole section where you go the future, the past, over and over again. And because I kind of interpret this in like three ways. The first interpretation is that this is like more foreshadowing of the album. You're saying that like the future and the past and time will somehow play a role in the album. And then my second interpretation is that you're saying vENERGY is the past, vEMOTION is like the present or future or something. And then my third interpretation is that you just wanted something cool to say. Are any of these interpretations correct?
The third one for sure is correct, but it was the future in the past. When I add that in there, it was mostly it was supposed to kind of be a callback to the first album, to where the whole using kind of in the first album the thing that the leitmotif for the first album was kind of using those kind of samples like the pull-up kind of thing and using that throughout the album, and having the future and the past kind of be kind of like a one-shot little saying kind of like that was kind of supposed to be a little bit of a homage from the previous album, to where I could have turned vEMOTION to have the future and the past kind of be spread throughout the album, but it was, instead of having doing that like the first album, it was more kind of a setup thing, and it was definitely, having those words there was definitely it was supposed to be somebody being like worried about the future and the past at the same time, but they have to live in the present, and having repeat the future, the past over and over and over again is just kind of them. It's them going through like, man, I don't want to think about this type beat. You know what I mean? It's like I keep thinking about the future, I keep thinking about the past. It's them being stressed out about it, and the whole kind of first song is just kind of that anxiety is what I wanted to kind of like show. You know.
So basically what you're saying is that even though these are just like a bunch of cool ad-libs, this song is not only an introduction to the album, but it's also like an introduction to the characters that we'll be encountering. Is that correct?
Yes. It's the song. The first song is kind of like it's. The first song is supposed to, like, with the words being the future and the past there, when I put those in there mostly because it's because the album has to do with kind of like, what have I done in my past, what have I done in my future. So yeah, it's kind of an introduction to the story in general. Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then we go to like the 4 arc words of the song and possibly the whole album. Let go, feel everything. What does that phrase mean to you?
Let go, feel everything. So, it's kind of, kind of literal, where sometimes you just gotta let go of like things you're overthinking. Just kind of like just live in the moment, and in a way, the story kind of forces the characters to do that because of what happens in what happens in the story. But yeah, so kind of let go, feel everything. What that means to me is just kind of like, sometimes you just gotta live in the moment, can't think too hard about whatever. Just kind of let yourself de-stress by just living in the moment of it, And yeah, I think sometimes I have, problems, thinking too hard about something, and sometimes you just kind of go, you kind of have to go, and when you're in that moment of just kind of like trying to like experience things, a lot of things, you can be really inspired to do a lot of stuff. So, in the context of this album, it's kind of like when the end happens, it kind of forces them to think about everything, kind of let go of what they're feeling and try to figure out what they want to do, and that's kind of where that kind of and in general, like when this album talks about kind of like when the album talks about but it talks about kind of like feelings and stuff like that. And sometimes they hold themselves back and they don't want to tell what they're thinking about. And it can blow up in their face and stuff like that, kind of like what happens in the Emotion song. So it's a lot of it also has to do with the vibes as well for the song too. It's just kind of like putting everything on the table as well is kind of what I wanted to say with the saying as well. So sorry, I kind of talk in circles a bit, but yeah, that's
no worries. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
kind of the feeling there.
It is a feeling. It is a really interesting feeling. But yeah, you basically just like telling listeners to just like let go of whatever it's on their mind and just like go through the emotions of this album. Is that correct?
Yes.
And yeah, the production on the song is actually quite interesting because like it starts out pretty trancey, and then it goes into this wild trap drop, and then it transitions into this upbeat house banger. How did the structure of this song come to be? Because like I want to point this out, it kind of reminds me of the different drops in vENERGY's opener, Feel Alive. Was it like meant to be like a homage to that?
Yes. For the first song, I wanted kind of that EDM, kind of that vENERGY feeling as an introduction, but the first song was going to be a hybrid of vENERGY and vEMOTION, kind of like, okay, we were here before and now we're in this kind of album now. So yeah, Let Go Feel Everything was supposed to kind of be a bridge song from my previous era to the current one.
Yep. And it is a pretty interesting opener, basically like sets the tone for the whole album. All right. Before we move on to the next song, any last things you want to add about this song in particular?
Anything I want to add to it?
If you don't, if you feel like you've said all that you want to say, that's okay.
Yeah, I got you. Let's see. Well, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. I think I'm pretty good with it. But yeah, I'm really happy with the opening song. I think it also works really good as an opener to a show as well. It's kind of a good banger to kind of set everything up. So yeah, I think the song actually Fantastic Reality, when I played that show, I opened with this song as well, and the version of that song had even more added lyrics from the rest of the album, and in the first part kind of like cut different lyrics there, so even more so this song kind of works really well as an opener for a show as well, which yeah, that's always fun.
Oh yeah, so that's the overture idea. Yeah, I mean, like it does like remind me of artists who like start their concerts with like a whole montage of like lines from the rest of the songs they'll be playing. And that's pretty cool. All right, so here we are on track 2, the first single, and also my number 1 favorite song of 2025. So I'm gonna sorry for gassing you up too much. But yeah, Die For You featuring Isaa Corva. And it's definitely the most uplifting song of the whole album. It's really carefree, it's really joyous, as much as like say the happiness of vENERGY. And it's something that I really connected with because do you mind if I get anecdotal for a moment?
Yeah, no worries. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm currently in my first year of college, and there have been like opportunities, karaoke events. I love singing karaoke around campus as much as I can, and well, ever since December, this has been like my go-to song to perform at karaoke. Because like the 6 minute runtime of this thing is like really interesting. It keeps changing. It keeps evolving. The drops are different. The last chorus, the choruses are really grand, especially at the end, which is just so euphoric. And then like I've been like set up a mini structure for this song when I'm performing it. Like I encourage everyone to clap during the first drop, and then encourage everyone to stand up and rave during the second drop, and then last chorus I encourage everyone to wave their flashlights. And this energy, it does like bring. I love engaging the audience, and it kind of like brings to mind concerts and festivals and DJ sets where people can just have the time of their life without a worry of their lives. And I know that you've like been doing this for like a decade at least. You've played a whole ton of shows. You know that energy much better than I do. So is the song and the production, is it like meant to replicate the energy of those concerts and festivals? And was it like influenced by any experiences or situations where you really felt joyful?
I see. So, when I was writing the song, it was definitely made kind of with that hype in mind, for sure, of like a live show, and having the really long kind of build up drop in the middle. I wanted to, I definitely had that in mind for that. But at the same time, with the choruses, I wanted to I wanted it to kind of really kind of lay its emotions on that sleeve, you know. And one of the main at the time when I was writing the song and in the album in general, I was listening to a lot of emo music that I didn't listen to when I was growing up in high school. And my wife was actually really big into a lot of these emo bands, and she gave me a lot of recommendations. And the top line for this song was actually I don't remember what song it was. There was a song that really helped me write this song. Let me search it up real quick. Hold on, into my saved things really quick. So, because like if you listen to that song, you can kind of hear the influence in it. But like the edginess of it is like really what I wanted to encapsulate when I wrote the choruses, because I wanted these choruses in this song to really hit. And when I listened to these emo songs back in the day, that were really popular back in the day, during the kind of like that movement, a lot of them had those like really strong choruses and really high notes and stuff, and you can really tell like they're pushing their voice to kind of tell that emotion. And yeah, I just wanted to capture that kind of energy with this one. So the song was "Make Damn Sure" by Taking Back Sunday. That song is like instrumental in me wanting to make something similar to capture that energy, and that's when I kind of combined both the emo energy with the EDM energy and combined both to make this song. So yeah, for sure, I've definitely listened to Make Damn Sure, as that song was very instrumental into kind of what I wanted to do with this album and just this song in general. So yes.
Yeah, I can see those rock influences that you mentioned, because I was like making one of my friends listen to the song, and then when the chorus hit, they just suddenly got reminded of like all 2010s, 2000s rock songs in general. So that's pretty much like the vibe you're aiming for, right?
Exactly, that's crazy, yeah.
Alright, so let's take a look at the lyrics here, because the story starts with, well, the relationship starting, or in this case, I guess the on part of the relationship. And there are lines like, yeah, you said it follows me, and then yeah, you said I'm a mess, and it kind of like characterizes this partner as like someone who's struggling with something, maybe something mental. Is it supposed to like based on like some sort of mental struggle, or is it just like some fake thing so we can like insert our own struggles into that instead?
It's definitely more of kind of like the partner's struggles of feeling like they're not enough, they're always messing up, and you know, they feel like in a relationship you're probably better off without them type beat, and you know, the other person kind of sees it, you know, that's not the truth, you're trying. It's just kind of that dichotomy of them trying to, you know, live with each other and try, you know, the main singer trying to support the other person while the other person just feels so bad about themselves, you know. So yeah, and at the end of the day, it's kind of like a really big mental struggle, you know.
Yeah, so basically it's just like picking off of like the overthinking of like feel everything. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Before we move on to the next song, anything else you wanna add about this one?
So this one, this song really kind of this song really made me fall in love with the post-chorus. The concept of a post-chorus, and ever since this song, I really love writing post-choruses. And when I mean post-chorus is kind of like, you know, the extra chorus at the end of the song, where they add in another line, like another counter melody to the main melody, and then they both kind of interact with each other. I love really doing that kind of thing. This song was kind of one of my first songs to kind of try to make something similar to that concept, where it's like the final chorus comes in, and then after that there's another chorus that comes in to intertwine with that chorus. And this was one of the first songs that I was able to realize a song like that. And I think ever since, I just love writing songs that have those intertwining choruses in it. and yeah. So yeah, this song in general is one of my favorites to work on and write. And it's really helped me kind of move forward with what I want to do with my future songs. So it's a really great song.
It is really fantastic. I sometimes describe it as a 6-minute rave epic. Since like you didn't really make official statements on the 4 singles, I'm gonna like mention the collaborators in this interview. How's it like working with Isaa Corva? Because like I discovered her through another song and also this song, and turns out she's got a whole history as a talented free singer.
Yeah, just working with them was a breeze. Like I sent them the guides over, and they're like, they asked if they want anything extra like that, or and I didn't need any redos. It's like they delivered exactly what I wanted the first time, which was crazy. And yeah, just working with them was just they're really professional about it, and they're just a really talented person that they don't need a redo because they get it right the first time. So, yeah, very, very awesome singer, and they're very talented with what they do.
Absolutely talented, yeah. All right, so the third song, "It Won't Matter," featuring Caspurr Catacini, and this one's interesting because like this, you mentioned that there's an argument in the story, and then one of them just decides to leave, and that's what basically happens in the song. I don't know if you kept the perspective of this one ambiguous, but is the one breaking it off like the same person who was overthinking, or the person who wanted to support them in like the previous song?
So the person who kind of it was so like the first song is kind of like the one side of the argument, and the second song is the other side. So yes, the person in the first song that's just wanted to just kind of be like, I've been better off without you type beat because I'm gonna hurt you. That's the person they're talking to basically. So yeah, it's kind of the other side of the argument with this song.
Ooh, okay, that's pretty cool. The structure of the production on this song is also pretty fascinating. Let's take a look at the first drop. It's one of 2 drum and bass songs on the album. It's a genre that you haven't really done with JOENN. And I don't know if you've done drum and bass under the DJ name. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But yeah, it's really chaotic, this one. It goes from like one hectic thing to another, and then another, and it kind of like makes me think of the aggressive noises of vENERGY. What was the creation process for this particular drop like?
So a lot of the songs on this album kind of have a pre-existing song or a pre-existing idea that I want to make something similar to, but this one had the type of drop that I did with this one was a drop that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, because I've heard a lot of drum and bass songs that have that very like long kind of chord stuff and then just like really tight percussion in it, and I actually haven't done a drum and bass drop. I haven't done a take on that kind of drop myself, so I wanted to take a song to do that, and that's this one. I've heard a lot of songs like that, like kind of similar to in this vein of things past years, and this is kind of my chance to kind of do that. And of course I built this song around that very kind of like emo sound. Specifically, this is like the most emo sounding song on the album, and for the drop in the vENERGY stuff, it definitely is a lot more aggressive, a lot more aggressive songs on the album in terms of that kind of sound that you're looking for, and yeah, it has that influence from vENERGY in it for sure. But it's only really that specific section in the middle that goes really crazy. Then it goes back to that more songwriting stuff. So I wanted to just kind of pop that in there as a kind of like, this song is going to be really chaotic because the guy who's talking about it is really chaotic in general. So I wanted to just kind of go crazy with it. So yeah, it was really fun. Like this one.
Yeah, the dichotomy of this song is interesting because like now that I think about it, the drum and bass drop is just like basically the argument intensifying, the overthinking getting worse, but then the punk and emo influences, they really shine with this really anthemic second drop with the catchy can vocals. That will definitely be a blast to sing along to. And you mentioned this song was The song was like inspired by Ohio is for Lovers. And how did this like particular gang vocal section get like paired with the drum and bass of the rest of the track?
So, you know, going into the song, when I first conceptualized it, it was definitely going to be like, I wanted to be able to have this song, like I wanted to, like, if I had the means, like I could, like if you played the song with just guitar, bass, and drums, it would just straight up sound like a punk song, like a punk emo song. And I wanted kind of that to ring through the entire way. And especially towards the end, like if you just replace the synths and stuff and the drums with just a regular setup for an emo band, that shit would go hard, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's kind of like the vibe going through it. I wanted to kind of make an emo song, but it has that emo DNA in it with a drum and bass like coat on top. So that was kind of what the thought was going there, and you had to add the woes if you wanted like a kind of that vibe. So that was really, really fun to do. So like so I just took a bunch of woes and just put them over and over and over on top of each other to kind of create that big gang vocal sound. It was really fun. So yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah, so it's basically just an emo song, but without the guitar. Instead of guitars, you got synths, basically.
Yes, that was the concept.
Nice. All right. Before we continue on, anything else you want to say about It Won't Matter?
I remember playing this song at the time when I was making this. I had a show in Florida, and the vEMOTION wasn't out yet, and I played this I played this song at the show just to kind of test it to see what it was like, and it was really, really cool because the entire audience is singing that last part, and I was like, oh shit, this is so surreal. And yeah, that was really cool. I was able to play this song like a couple of months, like maybe 1 or 2 months before the actual album came out at a show, and the audience reception was really good. So it was one of my favorite songs to the album.
Yeah, that was a sound really fun. I think I should also give this a shot on my next karaoke, but that last part will definitely be fun with an audience.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, track 4, Can't Move On, featuring Himemiya. When you wrote about this on Twitter, you said that the second verse of the song is a callback to You're the Only One, which influenced the whole album. How so?
So in the second verse, in You're the Only One, in the beginning, in the first verse of You're the Only One in that song, the kind of the vocoded vocals on top, the call response part right in the beginning, it's like, I need some time, so I took those exact lines and placed them in this song in the second verse, and had a different reaction from it. Instead of in the first, so in You're the Only One, it's kind of more of like a trying to get back together thing, and in this one it's kind of like, no, we shouldn't be together. Instead, as a reaction to those same exact lines, it's kind of a throwback to You're the Only One, because You're the Only One is what started vEMOTION. So I wanted to kind of have a throwback in this song to that song, to You're the Only One, as kind of almost an exact kind of like melody line and reaction thing there. So yeah, that was really good, really cool to add in there, and it wasn't necessarily going to be in there in the first place. Because as I was making the song, I was like, I was trying to figure out more ways to kind of expand on the theme I was writing about. And it's like, I had the idea, like, okay, since the previous song kind of started the whole thing, how about we do a big callback? And that's how I got the idea of putting those lines into this song, and having that different reaction. I thought it was really clever.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So it's basically just like a parallel to that particular opening section of You're the Only One. Is that right?
Yes.
And even though the lyrics just basically touch on this heartbreaking topic of like betrayal, the cycle of lies, and being unable to move on, the production here is actually pretty interesting. It's like one of the more minimal electronic songs on the album with this restrained shuffling groove. And you mentioned that story in the dumpling restaurant when you heard No Aspect's sweet release. What made you choose to pair like this pretty minimal production with the lyrics?
I wanted a song on the album to kind of showcase more of the songwriting and vocals more, and kind of vary my production a little bit more on the album, since I know that I kind of, in general, whenever I make music, I kind of like to go really intense with it and put a lot of stuff, being really aggressive with it. But I wanted to try to push myself to make a song kind of the antithesis of what I usually do, and kind of test myself to see, kind of have myself rely more on the writing instead of more on the sound design. And I wanted to take this track to kind of feature that. And yeah, it's mostly the decision to kind of pull back on the production was more of a kind of like trying to put a focus on the lyrics and more of the vibe instead of the intricacies of the sound design. And it was also a really cool test to myself whenever I was working on the song too. So yes.
So basically just like production's taking a backseat to further like emphasize the lyrics. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Especially considering how vEMOTION is songwriting focused. And speaking of the production, this is a detail that you seem to be pretty proud of. The string riff in the middle that you added 2 iterations before the song was finalized. How did that happen? Like, what led to that being added into this minimal song?
Yeah, when I was in the final run of adding things to the rest of the album and trying to finalize every single song, this is one of the songs to where I felt like there could be a little bit more to it in the second verse, and I don't know. Because I listened to the song a lot, and I couldn't really think of what to do, and I just started messing around in FL Studio, and I was like, oh shoot, this would actually work here, because like there was many different things I tried, and not a lot of things were working, and I'm like, okay, what if I just like make longer notes and as a counter melody, and it worked out really well. Yeah, but it took a while to figure out what would work there, and I'm happy that I took the time to not rush it out and just like not ship it out the way it was before I added the strings, because this album definitely kind of taught me to take more time with projects. Historically, like the DJ Joe projects, a lot of the projects I released there were I feel like I could have spent a lot more time to kind of refine things, and having a longer period of time to kind of work on stuff with JOENN. This is a prime example of taking your time is sometimes better. Sometimes you don't need to just like ship it out whenever you have the idea fresh. Sometimes you gotta sit on the idea and let it stew up, and you might get something better. And I got something better, so I'm happy I took more time when making these songs.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yes, it's definitely best to just like give these songs time to just what's the word again? Just to like settle in, I guess. Develop. It does work. And yeah, it is a small detail. It just like adds a bit to the melodrama of the track. All right. Before we continue, do you have any last words for Can't Move On?
I think we're good with this one. This one was a nice, simple, and sweet song that I had a good time working on, and Himemiya did a really good job doing vocal performance on it. And it's a solid song overall. Let's go.
All right. Let's go to the 5th song, the second single, Not Worth It, featuring Miori Celesta. Okay, and this one's a really frenzied song. It's got this hybrid trap drop, and the synths are just like woozing all over the place. And while Miori is like singing about leaving a toxic relationship, so it's just the off section of the relationship, as you mentioned. And at the moment, I have one main question for this. What songs or anything inspired the melodrama of this track in both the lyrics and the production?
What song? Like, you're saying like what song kind of inspired everything kind of for this?
Yes, but if there's anything else that aside from songs that also inspired this, you can also mention it if you want to.
Gotcha. So one of the main things that I wanted to work on when I wrote the song was trying to write lyrics that aren't so straightforward, because I kind of struggle with that. A lot of the lyrics that I write in general are very straightforward. Kind of like it's kind of them like a lot of the words that I write and the lyrics that I write are very kind of like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm saying, kind of thing. And I wanted to really I wanted to try to experiment more in writing lyrics that are more vague or more talking about like a general feeling, and this was kind of like the verses were kind of about experimentation for that, and that was kind of like one of the focuses when I was making the song. In terms of like sonic inspirations, like the drop and the choices of instruments, it's hard to pinpoint a single thing, but with the drop in the song, with the very fast melody line there with the saw synths, I've always been inspired by the kind of like virtual. It's very like virtual, self-inspired. And in general, I was always a really big fan of rhythm game music, and really fast melody lines using saws and saw synths in general, and having I wanted to I've always have like this kind of a like I guess an addiction to fast saw notes and stuff like that, so this was kind of an excuse to put a bunch of really fast saw notes in there, and the drop in itself is it's I think there was a long time ago, I remember there's a song that kind of kept with me for the longest time, and this was kind of a recreation of it. I can't tell you what song it was, but a long time ago I had a show in Orlando, Florida, and I went to like the house of my friend that was hosting the show before the show was starting, just to kind of meet up with everyone, and there was someone playing, like there was like decks there, and they were kind of just practicing, and he played a song that was like a trap song, but it had like Japanese rhythm game saws over the drop. I'm like, oh shoot, this is sick. And that sound and that song kind of like kept with me for a very long time, and yeah, this song was kind of like, okay, I can actually really do that now in like an original song. So there we go. It's like a trap song with like Japanese saw synths in the drop. And I kind of first started out with the lyrics as the main focus, and then I kind of built around it, and like, oh shit, this is an opportunity to do that sound. So I was able to do that with this song, and it turned out really, really cool. And yeah, one of the main things I am proud of this song is the lyrics. So yeah.
Yeah, and since you mentioned this song being like perfect for rhythm games, I don't play in rhythm games all that much, but what I do know is that currently, as far as I know, you have there are like 2 maps for 2 songs on vEMOTION that are currently public on Beat Saber, Emotion and Screaming Out, and yeah, and I watched and requested that someone try the Emotion one, and then yeah, that song's like really intense. The arms were so tired by the end of it, but it is fun. And yeah, but this one would be also really challenging for rhythm games. And with that in mind, I don't know if you play rhythm games yourself. Do you?
Yes, I do. I do a lot.
You think you'd be like suited and well prepared to try any of the songs here on any of your songs on a rhythm game?
Yeah, I'd love to. I grew up playing Dance Dance Evolution, and I've always been in love with the medium of rhythm game music. I made a whole alias on the rhythm game music stuff too. So yeah, for sure, I'm down. Yeah, that could be really, really fun. Oh yeah,
How's it like working with Miori Celesta for this song? Because she does bring out some really powerful vocals, especially in the chorus and the ending there.
Yeah, Miori Celesta, I've worked with her quite a bit before this song, and you know, she's always a pleasure to work with. And you know, I love the timbre of her voice and how she can get that power. Yeah, if I remember correctly, she added extra harmonies. No, yeah, she added extra harmonies in this song and added a bunch of ad libs. Initially gave the song with her with a lot less ad libs and harmonies into it, and she added a bunch on her own. So she kind of really brought the vocal part and arrangement of this song to life with her addition of the vocals and the ahs. That's all her. She added that herself. And yeah, she kind of was the other half of the song and really helped us bring the song come to life. So yeah, it's a pleasure to work with her as always.
Cool. Before we continue, do you have anything else you want to say about Not Worth It?
For sure. When I was first coming up with the song in December, I forget the year before this album came out in December, I was still working on this song. 2024 December, there we go. I had this song and I showed it to my friend Nick. He goes by VGR or No K, and I was able to show him the song then. It was a super early version of it, and he really liked it. He said that he told me to add strings in that second half right before that big drop, and that was a really good idea, and I did it, and it ended up being really awesome. So those strings are actually a suggestion from Noke, VGR, one of my best friends, to add in there, and there was a really great recommendation, because that really made that last drop hit really hard with that string build up. That was thanks to him. So shout out VGR. He's a real one.
shout out VGR. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are on the midpoint of the album. It literally divides it into two halves. Memories, the sixth song featuring Lumi. And you said that this song started similarly to Deadmau5's The Veld, which I can kind of hear in the verses. But then it transformed into something more akin to Silver Hearts at Dick, because you have got these really loud drops with these blazing synths, stacked synths, and also some forceful percussion. And how did that particular transformation happen?
So for this song, let me try to remember a little bit. Memories. So this song took a little bit to come to fruition, and it initially started with just that verse and stuff, so when it was first writing the song, it took a bit to try to figure out the direction of the song. I knew I wanted it to have to deal with some kind of bittersweet memories thing. That was kind of like the topic I wrote. Like whenever I write lyrics, I write at the top of the document. It's like, this is kind of the theme I want to drive through, and I kind of brainstorm from there. So the main thing was trying to do bittersweet memories, and a song like that, kind of a retrospective song. I remember coming up with the hook, all I need is the memories. I remember coming up with that for a moment, more so before the verse, and then I worked the verse in to kind of build into that little hook, because the hook was pretty good, and first coming up with the hook took a little bit, but once I got that down, the song kind of started coming together faster, because I was able to build around it. And it got to a point in the songwriting to where I wanted to kind of change up the structure a little bit in the second half, and instead of going back into the hook as like the usual thing that would happen, would be a verse, and then now it's the hook, but it's like more stronger, and it's like with a beat behind it. But instead of doing that, I wanted to transfer into something else, and that goes to the ending post-chorus thing, and then the whole addiction to the post-chorus just kind of goes into that. So I was like, okay, having that post-chorus there at the ending, the really melodic section with the vocals on top of it, kind of adds a little bit more flavor to the overall composition, and also turns the narrative a little bit towards the negative side towards the end, and kind of shows that flip on kind of like, you're trying to stay positive, but there's always those negative emotions in the back of your head. And it kind of showcases that as it ends that way as well in the song. Because it's, they're kind of in this turmoil kind of bit right now. I kind of wanted to showcase that. So the main thing that kind of helped me make the song was writing, having a good foundation, that hook, that chorus section to build around, and helped me kind of make the song come to life a lot faster. It took a while to conceptualize, but once I got there, it was pretty easy to make the rest of it.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And you also kind of just like answered the next question I was just about to ask about the structure of the lyrics, since it just changes from recalling happy memories, and then suddenly there's this stop. But like, okay. All right. I guess all the memories were a lie. You told me the truth, and yeah, you practically just answered that question also. So thanks.
Yeah. A lot of it's kind of just like in the person's head, kind of thinking about, what's really going on, kind of doubting themselves. So it's just a nice little retrospective song.
It is. All right. Before we continue, do you have anything else you want to say about memories?
Sure. So Lumi, the vocalist on the song, I actually met her at the same convention that one I told you where I met with Nick BTR. That was Holiday Matsuri in Florida. She was actually a guest there for the VTuber section, and Domo was the one who introduced me to her, and I was also hanging out with Domo there too, and I was able to really connect with Domo there, and then Domo was able to introduce me to Lumi, and she was really fun and stuff. And I asked her, "Hey, I didn't know you sing. You want to make a song, this album I'm working on?" I was like, "Sure." And that's how I made the connection with Lumi. It was actually in person, not actually through her streams. And after that, I tuned in with her streams sometimes. She was playing like Legend of Zelda recently and stuff. That was always cool to see. So the way this song came to fruition was actually through meeting Lumi in person and asking, "Hey, would you be down to sing?" and something. She said yes, and then we just connected after there and made the song. So it was really cool.
Yeah, she does a really good vocal performance on this one. It's really interesting to see how like her soft vocals just like continue along with the really loud percussion, and then she builds out that high note at the end. It's really cool. Okay, so track 7, Scream, and the third single, Screaming Out, featuring HIRAGA and DEMONDICE. And you said that this was the first song that you made from the album. Is that correct?
The first song you said that I made from the album? It was definitely one of the first ones I made in the process of the album, for sure. Yeah,
because like that bridge where HIRAGA is screaming, and then like you've got these really growly synths and basses. It does remind me of like the dubstep songs of vENERGY. It's the most reminiscent of that. Was this like meant to be an intentional callback to that album, or were you like trying to do something different for Screaming Out and vEMOTION as a whole?
So for Screaming Out, it was very concept heavy. It was definitely Linkin Park heavy. When I made the song, it was like first, it was the thing when I was making it was like, okay, we gotta capture that new metal sound first, and then I can fill in everything else. And how intense a new metal drop would be. How does that translate into my style? And that translated into dubstep. The reason to add like dubstep in there was to try to match the energy of new metal. The reason why that's in there, not necessarily because of a connection to vENERGY. It was more of the process of making the song and trying to fulfill the equivalent to what a new metal song would sound like in my style.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It does feel like a song that is difficult to simply categorize because it is like this new metal fusion with dubstep, and the Linkin Park influence I can hear that, especially during the chorus. And speaking of the lyrics here, on vENERGY you wrote like 9 of its 10 tracks. You let Ririsha do the entirety of Blue Love, and Nana Asteria lended a hand for Savior. But on vEMOTION you basically wrote all 11 songs with a bit of help from your wife. However, Screaming Out is the only song with an additional songwriting credit, and that originates from DEMONDICE, who did her second verse. And it's someone you've also had some experience working with before. How did this second verse come to fruition, and does it like play a major role in the album's overall story, or would you just like consider it just like some additional comments and perspectives from DEMONDICE?
So the verse, so basically what happened is like, hey, I messaged DEMONDICE about it. Hey, would you be interested in this project I'm doing? This song is going to be about the topic of like kind of like depression and that kind of stuff, and how that's eating up anxiety and stuff. And I kind of told her like it's going to be connected to the story and stuff like that. I've worked with her in the past, and I trust her songwriting. So I wasn't really too worried about like her writing something weird or something off topic or whatever that. So I literally just said, hey, just write whatever. And then she delivered it. I'm like, this is good. We're done with that. That's it. That's good, because you wrote exactly what would need to be written. I was, it's mostly just asking them, and then, they wanted to be a part of the project, and they're like, awesome. And not really too much like changes or anything at all happened. It's just mostly like, okay, this is exactly what I was looking for. Let's put it in the song. So
That's nice. Her she does a really good job. It does like bring some new styles to the album. It's like the only, I'd say it's like the only song on the album with rapping, right? But let's also take a look at the other collaborator, HIRAGA, because he does some really aggressive vocals in that breakdown that I mentioned earlier. How did you end up like choosing him, and how did his vocals for that section just like come to fruition?
So HIRAGA and I have a very long history of working together, especially with DJ Joe, and I wanted to get him in on the vEMOTION album for sure. So when the time came, I was like, hey, I knew that he loved this type of song, and so I know he's super interested into it, and of course he was. And of course, I definitely wrote the screams for him with him in mind when it came to writing the song as well. And with working with HIRAGA is always a blast. He's super passionate about whatever he does. And he always gives me way too many lines because he always has these really cool ideas, and I almost every time I put in all these extra lines in there. But yeah, he's just super gung-ho about everything we work on. And like he gave me like fucking like 5 or 6 layers of screams, and for the little amount of screams that are in the song, because he really wants to make it sound good. So yeah, he's a really good perfectionist when it comes to his work, and it's always lovely working with him. So yeah, it was really great time.
And that's really cool. And I've heard that like even trying to record screams for say metal songs is pretty complex, because you've got like these different layers that won't be noticeable for like people who are less familiar with metal. And I like that there's this trading dichotomy, duality between HIRAGA and DEMONDICE. They just like go back and forth. It feels like two perspectives talking with each other. Okay. So before we continue, do you have anything you want to add about Screaming Out? Initially I did the rapping on the song for the first verse, because I wrote that first verse for the rap. It was not good.
but I needed something in there. It was interesting trying to write. This is also my first rap verse I've ever written, that was interesting. It took a lot of different iterations and to finally get this thing that I'm like, okay, this is all right, to send over for DEMONDICE to rap herself. I think it was a really cool song, especially for me, for a learning experience for like a couple of different aspects of it. And I think it turned out really, really good. It ended up being a really, really awesome song on the album, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out.
We're never gonna hear that JOENN original rap version.
Oh no, hell no.
No. Like for your first ever rap verse being written, it is pretty solid. I'll give you that. Yeah. And it works well with DEMONDICE and also the rest of the song.
Yeah,
all right,
nice
so yeah, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to track 8, Emotion, featuring Shiki Miyoshino, and you said that this is basically just like the song that defines the whole story and pretty much just sums it up to this point. And aside from that, this is also a reunion because Shiki Miyoshino was also on You're the Only One, and you mentioned that you wanted to showcase her vocal range when you wrote a top line for Emotion. And it is a really wild top line. Her vocals on the song are pretty much mind-blowing. Yeah. What led you to choose the song to be your next collaboration with her, and how did you end up like creating this really demanding top line?
So when it came about making the song, and when it came about to having Shiki back on the next album, because the first song that I worked with her on, vENERGY, was such a pivotal song to the creation of vEMOTION. I wanted her to sing on a song on this album that was, very important to the album itself. And I was like, okay, why not have a song that's kind of like a storytelling song, like a song that's kind of told in third person. With the whole all the songs I've written up until this point was kind of been in first person, so writing in third person, and also taking kind of the notes that I did for when I made for when I wrote Not Worth It, about being a little bit more vague with the lyrics and talking about more of a feeling. I wanted to kind of really challenge myself with this one, kind of make a whole story within a song. And that's kind of the concept I went with when I started making the song. And it shares a similar vibe to another song that I heard in the process of making this album, where it kind of has the same thing, where it's like kind of telling the story of someone, so when it came to like writing it, so like, okay, there's gonna be a lot of words in this, so I had to figure out a top line that was interesting to listen to, that wasn't too straightforward, because there's going to be a lot of words in it. So having it kind of that kind of like melody to it, kind of like this weird off like melody, weird off like rhythm to it, kind of kept it really interesting to listen to, but still be able to like tell a very long story in a way with a lot of details. I was able to find this middle ground of having all these words in here with interesting rhythm to listen to, so that it wouldn't be too boring to listen to, and just listening to like a story being told to you. And when it came to like the chorus, and especially towards the end, it gets the notes really, really high and really demanding. With a story about emotion, I wanted to try to push the range of Shiki, to really have her show that emotion as hard as she could with her abilities. And Shiki, extremely talented as she is, she was able to really deliver in the vocals. Like hitting these crazy high notes with the power that she can deliver with, and she did a really amazing job with this song. It's really amazing to work with someone like her, to have this kind of power and this kind of range to kind of really be I'm able to be really creative with the things I can write, and it's really awesome to work with someone like that. I was able to literally hit some of her lowest notes and some of her highest notes in the song. So it's super humbling to be able to work with someone that talented, and she really brought this song to life. And I sent her like the Vocaloid guides for the song. It's just Miku singing the entire thing, and then she comes back with this crazy ass thing. I'm like, all right, this song is the goat. So definitely with this song I wanted to push everything to 10, and Shiki really bring it to 11. So really happy with how everything turned out with this one.
Heck yeah. It really, when you mentioned like bring it to 10, bring it to 11, you technically were right. It is like this really fast and massive and maximalist future-based song, and while we're on, and the melodies that you created for those verses and also the chorus have really been very memorable. You just technically like created a vocal resume for her, I guess, in form of a song. I'm not sure if that I'm saying it right.
No, you got it.
But yeah, and while we're on the topic of melodies, you have officially confirmed that the melody in pre-chorus and the breakbeat section, all I wanted was for us to be happy, that is directly lifted from You're the Only One, They Don't Always Be Okay, and it even got to the point where you reposted some tweet by this guy named Guy. It's like really interesting. Aside from the fact that you're working with her again, this direct interpolation continues, like the songs being linked by the same theme of a struggling relationship. What inspired the song's lyrics, and what led to this particular melody connection?
So let's see. Yeah, one of the main things that I was thinking about when making the song was, going back to the whole, the reason why I made the album is You're the Only One, and I knew I had to make some kind of connection because Shiki is singing on the song. So I'm like, okay, it all kind of fell into place to where it's like, if Shiki's going to be in the song, the song's going to be kind of like the spiritual successor to You're the Only One. I got to make at least something as a callback to it, just to kind of like really set in stone, kind of like, Shiki's is kind of like what made this whole album happen. So I wanted to make an homage to the previous song You're the Only One in this one, and it kind of really fits in general because that whole song, the You're the Only One, could honestly be on vEMOTION with how it is, and as much as I wanted to just kind of throw it in here, of course I wanted to challenge myself to kind of make an original song instead of having a previous song from previous album on there. I could have reformed that song and made something different, put on this song, but I wanted to create something from scratch to create its own story. So instead of doing that, I like doing interpolations for little callbacks, and that's always really fun.
Yeah, it is fun. This is pretty much just like the most storytelling-ish kind of song on here, because like the lyrics are like, as you mentioned, whole lot of words here, whole lot of moments in the lyrics. Like there's plenty of escapism, if I'm not wrong. Literally taking a sip, throw it up, yeah, the dice are falling down. And it's like it's this when like your influence from worlds, it really shows, since you mentioned the storytelling from that album and Goodbye to a World. Yeah.
Yeah, you hit it right on the nail. Yeah, it's like definitely related to the whole inspirations with Port Robinson and everything there.
Nice. And and before we move on, I also want to point out this these two lines in the outro, and even if it all ends tomorrow, I still wouldn't know what to do. That's like preparing basically for the end, right? The next song.
Yeah, exactly. It's a precursor to what happens for sure, especially in the second verse where it says the skies turn gray, noise rips through the cityscape, and that's okay. She won't pay any mind to it. She's in disbelief. There's no way she can still think about him. So this right here is actually the end happening, and then she doesn't know it. She doesn't know what's happening because she's in her head about thinking about everything. She can't let go and feel everything, And even if it all ends tomorrow, I still want to know what to do. And then it happens. And the song happens, see, like it already happened in this song, but she never realizes it until the end.
Yeah, and then it happens. Yeah, so it's basically just like saying where we are at now, but it's also foreshadowing what's going to happen next, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, before we continue, do you have any last things you want to say about emotion?
Yeah, emotion. It was a really, really big challenge for me to write. It's a really big song. It's a lot going on in it, but it definitely turned out to be very fulfilling to finish up and kind of be in the album as a kind of like a grand opus in a way. And yeah, it's one of my favorite songs that I've written in my career, and it's super. Yeah, it's just super nice to kind of reflect back on it. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I just realized I should probably ask this also because the production on this, aside from the mellow, loud sections, and then it just suddenly picks up the tempo near the end. It's like a mad dash through the city or something. How did that come to be, particularly?
Let's see. A lot. I wanted to. Because the entire song before that has kind of been a lot like slower paced, and it's like the where the drums are placed and stuff. It's like it's not halftime in 120. It's like even less than halftime. It's like I don't know the technical term of it, but like the entire time. Yeah. It's like the song all leading up right into that moment has kind of been like kind of slower and kind of more about like the chords and stuff. And with the turning point of the song there, I wanted to really kind of step up the stakes of the song and kind of bring the energy back towards the end, just to kind of like really show kind of the turmoil going on. And I'm also just a really big fan of just that kind of progression to where the entire song kind of leads up to this just grand ending. I love making that kind of song to where it's a gigantic build up towards the end. It's just kind of my process as well.
Yeah, it's a really fun ending because like the rest of the song you just get hit in the feels, and then it's like you're just jumping up, letting loose for this entire ending section. Right. And speaking of ending, here we are at oh god, this is the punch from this are gonna be hefty. Well, not for now, but you get the point. Track 9, single 4, the fourth single, The End, featuring JubyPhonic, and this is like when they realize that the apocalypse is basically happening, and I guess people like call them crazy. I guess is that basically what's going on.
It's kind of like it's the whole thing where it happens all the time in history, where everyone doubts some crazy thing is happening right until the last moment, and then like, oh, whoops, it actually is happening, or they don't even think it's happening until the end happens. It's just kind of those kind of feelings where time and time again there are times in history and things that happen where it's like there are people who are just so blinded by their views that they can't actually accept the reality of what's happening, and that kind of sentiment kind of holds in the song.
So it's a don't look up kind of situation. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
Yes. And well, even though it does like point the story in like a different trajectory, it's still pretty unexpected for like anyone who's first listening to this album, because like the previous 8 tracks have been pretty grounded. They're just like about love and the emotions of heartbreak, and then suddenly you've got the apocalypse happening right here. And what inspired you to bring this sudden shift of events in this way into the album?
I kind of like the kind of how dramatic and drastic the change is, because when you think about it, the entire album is just these two people being in their heads the entire time about what's going on, and it's not until something crazy happens that they realize they've been arguing the entire time during the apocalypse, basically. They kind of wake up and be like, wait a second, what's going on? What do we got to do? And this song hitting is just kind of like a big, kind of kick in the face for reality, I guess, kind of a reality check, and kind of like a turn of the page in the album, kind of being kind of like, it's just kind of like I wanted it to be. It kind of feels like what's the word for it? I wanted it to kind of be a little bit of a turning on its table and kind of like turning your head on the table on the listener to kind of add a little bit more dimension to the album in a way, and add an element of surprise in a way to make it interesting, and kind of added a third dimension to the album instead of just being kind of like a heartbreak album. It still is at the end of the day, but having this song in here, I feel like adds a little bit more, at that extra spice that's needed to add more depth to the story. It's my way of kind of doing that.
So basically, just like the story expands once the characters actually take a look at the world they're in, and not just like their own relationship and their own emotions. That's like what's happening right here. Yeah, in all fairness, nobody really expects an apocalypse. It's like a last surprise. You never see it come in. Yes. Alright. Oh yeah, and with this in mind, because like you mentioned in the beginning, you said that after the end they just like start wondering if they're living their lives right. So the chorus basically says, "I won't be the same." That's like, it's not like a reevaluation. It's not just like them reevaluating them, because like now knowing it's all going to end soon. Is it just like them starting to change their perspectives or something?
It's mostly about in the chorus where she says, "I won't be the same." It's mostly them talking about not necessarily the two people, not talking about like the relationship. It's mostly talking about how it's mostly kind of like a it's kind of them, like when the thing happens, they won't be the same because it happened, the whole apocalypse thing.
Because death.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not necessarily death, but now like they have to live in a world that's going to be completely different. You know what I mean? Not necessarily them dying, because it could be. I didn't want to like. When I made the song, I didn't want to be like, oh, there's a meteor falling down, like, oh, there's zombies, oh, it's a pandemic. Like, I didn't want it to have a very specific thing. I wanted it to be vague enough to where, when the chorus hits, it's them talking about something in general of it, like if like, it's going to be talking about like a general like disaster that happens, that they won't be the same from it, and they have to reevaluate what they want to do with their life. They didn't want to be too specific about it, because that wasn't necessarily the main focus of the album. The main focus of the album was going to be more on the emotions of what the person's going through, rather than what exactly happened in the apocalypse, so to say. Because towards the end of the song, they wrap the song up to bring it back together to what they were talking about before. It's where it's like in the end, they're happy that they stayed, but they won't be the same. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Yeah. So it's basically just both literal but also emotional, basically, that line. Yes. And yeah, so the structure of the song, it's like this pretty epic drum and bass song that takes listeners on a journey, and then suddenly, in like the middle of the song, instead of a sudden drop, there's this really intense breakdown with some chaotic synths going around. Does it like link back to the other drum and bass song here, It Won't Matter, and maybe vENERGY? Yeah, it was mostly I wanted to that second drop there. I wanted to make it up that second drop the kind of like the rising bird, that section. I wanted to definitely get more on that vENERGY side aggressiveness in there for that section, but because it is dealing with kind of like an apocalyptic kind of situation, I wanted to have something more aggressive in there just to kind of see that side of the nature of it instead of it being a more introspective song. And also having that drop in there that's more intense kind of adds that extra flavor that I think the song would have needed instead of being melodic the entire time. So I think I wanted to put that drop in there just to kind of contextualize the subject matter, and having it talk about like the apocalypse was also a good time for me to put in a harder drop. I thought it was a little fun thing to add in there. So it was definitely something in there to match the vibe.
It definitely does match the vibe, yeah. And one more thing. How's it like working with JubyPhonic for this song? Because she also does some impressive vocals, especially in the chorus and near the end.
So working with her, I've worked with JubyPhonic back and forth throughout the years, so she's been pretty busy with what she does. But whenever she makes time, she always tries to make time for different projects. I try to introduce her, and sometimes, she's a little too busy, and that's okay. But she was able to make it out for this album, and working with her is always a blast. I wanted to also try to push her range to see what she could reach in this song, especially in the chorus. Initially, when I made the song, the first draft of the song was actually a key higher than it was, and it hit high. It actually the last chorus where it's you're gonna say, oh, I won't be the same, where it hits higher there. There's nothing to say, and the end we're together is better. That where it hits that higher note there in the chorus, I won't be the same. Originally, every chorus was supposed to hit that note. And I changed all the previous choruses to not hit that note to make that last chorus hit harder. But when I first sent over the project to JubyPhonic, it was just that last chorus because it's just kind of the original idea I had for the song. So it was already at a 10 that I sent it to her. I was like, hey, are these notes, feasible for your range? Can you hit these notes, but hit them while still retaining power? And she actually said that if we lowered the key down a half step, it would be easier for her to have more power within the notes. And I ended up doing that because it'd be easier on her vocally, and it would deliver better results with her vocal. So I was able to do that in the beginning. And overall, this song was also inspired by Paramore, which the song "All I Wanted Was You." Where it goes higher towards that ending section. It's kind of there's a similar kind of like movement I did in the chorus that's similar to that song, and that's one of the main inspirations for the melody line in the chorus. So yeah, working with Juby, she was able to bring the energy I wanted with the song, and she's able to hit the notes with the power that I was looking for. So she really did a good job bringing the vision to life with this song, and it's always a pleasure to work with Juby. I've worked with her, I think, since I want to say like 2014 or 15. I've worked with her back in DJ Joe stuff, so it's really nice to be able to work with her again, but on an original song. So it's always nice to work with her. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, putting that particular note on the end of the last chorus does make it feel way more impactful. I agree. Mm-hmm. And also lowering the key down, coincidentally, just like makes it fit with the song behind and ahead of it, Emotion and I'll Find a Way, just like add some consistency between them. Yeah, and before I move on to the next song, do you still have anything you want to say about the end?
I think I've covered all the points of it, but yeah, it's just a really fun song. I always love working with breakbeats, and I think in the future I'd like to make some more drum and bass songs because it's always a fun time in this tempo. Yeah.
All right, and continuing on to the 10th song. Hope you're still awake. It has been taking a surprisingly long while. Yeah. I'll Find a Way featuring Rio Fukai, which, fun fact, her appearance on this album was just like what led me to discover vEMOTION and you as a whole.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like this climax, I guess, of the album. Can say that way. And it's really gorgeous. It's just like this beautiful melodic dubstep song. And yeah, since like the characters have decided to just spend time together once again before the apocalypse hits, what made you decide to have like this really lovely song as the climax after the end, as like the high point of the album?
I've always been a big fan of like rock ballads and just kind of those like really like slow but powerful emotional songs, and I wanted to include a song like that on this album, and this was kind of my time to kind of like make some big rock ballad anthem, and at least my equivalent to it, and yeah, that's kind of how I started when I was writing the song. What I wanted to make, I had these feelings of wanting to make this kind of song, and I was able to do that within the context of the story. When I made this song, I feel like this song was made earlier in the album context, the context of the album, and I was able to fit it within the storyline when I made more songs to connect the songs in between. And yeah, since this was made a little bit earlier, I feel like some of the lyrics were a little more vague, and then I was able to contextualize them with songs before and after it. So I was able to fit the song within the narrative when I wrote this song before knowing what the album was going to be about, actually. But this was definitely a song I wanted to write in general. So despite the narrative, I was going to write something like this anyways because I'm a big fan of this style. And I'm happy I was able to make it work within the album's context, though. So initially this song was more vague, and I was able to recontextualize it within the storyline, and it made it fit pretty well. So the main reason why I really wanted to write this song is because I'm just a big fan of this song's style, and I wanted to write something even before contextualizing the story of the song. So I just like this kind of song style.
Yeah, it's a great style. It's a really beautiful style. Melodic dubstep does like bring out the feels in ways that electronic music isn't really easily known for. And yeah, and now that you mention it, the lyrics of this song, they feel like a callback to like the comfort of Die For You, and also like the comfort that will come in the last song after this, Everything Will Be All Right. Is that true?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like what's the word I'm looking for? It's the kind of like that warm feeling the song gives you. Like I always try to look for that kind of like comforting feeling whenever I'm making a song of this kind of like caliber. And definitely like the whole bittersweet thing as well is also one of my favorite kind of things to write about. And everything that's just kind of like like happy but sad and somewhere in between. It fulfills that as well.
It's definitely bittersweet, yeah. And in the production, there's this especially interesting section after the second chorus. It's like a flute-like solo kind of thing. Yeah. And how is that brought into the song?
It's like it's just kind of like kind of the sense that I've kind of been drawn to in general. When it comes to that kind of stuff, I've kind of been working with similar songs for a very long time. Similar synths and patches for a long time. And I was able to use, some of the stuff I've working with in the past within this song, and kind of make it work within the context of this the direction on this song, and whenever I'm able to do something similar, like kind of like a melody line like that, I always try to take the chance to, and I was able to make something like that fit in this song as well. But the idea for that, I don't know. I think at the time before that, I was working on a remix of a similar song, similar kind of like timbre to the synth there, and I decided to kind of port it over, and it worked out really well. So yeah, it's a great little section.
Okay, before we move on to the final song, do you have anything else you want to say about "I'll Find a Way"?
So "I'll Find a Way." Rio did a really good job with the vocals on this one for sure. She has a crazy range, crazy power. I love kind of like all that kind of rasp. That's awesome. And she actually added a bunch of different ad-libs in this song, and took this song kind of a little bit different of a take than I was looking for in the beginning, in a positive way. She added her spin on the melody line and certain ad-libs and stuff, and actually we went back and forth on certain sections, especially the quieter section towards the end, and whether or not how we wanted to do that section. She wanted more instrumentation in that section, but I wanted there was one version of the song where it was just her vocals and vocoded, and that's it, nothing else in that section. But she wanted a little bit more in that section, so we kind of compromised where I added like soft electric piano in that section instead of it being completely silent there. And I kind of liked it better that way in the end after listening to it. So she had a good idea of general vibe of what the ending should have sounded like there, and it's always nice to kind of go back and forth with different ideas with someone, because it's cool to see their perspective on the topic. And so Rio helped actually write certain sections of the song as well, so it was really cool working with Rio. They helped kind of make the song how it is today. So yeah, really amazing vocalist.
Yeah, definitely. Her high note at the end is really astounding. Yeah, and those additions you mentioned, that subtle piano in the vocoder section, that does add a pretty nice touch, and also those ad-libs at the very end. Because it's really helpful to have those in there, because now you have two songs on the album that are perfect for singing along live.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright, made it to the actual end of the album, the last song, track 11, Everything Will Be Alright, featuring Ellie Minibot. And we and you already kind of talked about this very early on. It's more of a pop-ish ballad with that synth reminiscent of Easier to Love You. Since it's the last song of the album, it just leaves this heartwarming and comforting final impression to listeners. Even though we don't know what happens to the characters afterwards, the last message the listeners hear is just basically everything will be alright, and they'll be there for comfort. How did you just end up selecting this particular tone for this album to end on?
A big reason, Porter Robinson. I always wanted, the newest album that he released, one of the songs on there, which is Easier to Love You.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Easier to Love You. That song on that album is one of my favorites, and it's definitely a real tearjerker. And I wanted to make a slower song on the album, and I thought having a slower song at the end would kind of match perfectly with the vibe. But with the way the story was going, I thought having a slower song at the end would be perfect to what I want to say. And when I was looking for slow song examples, I'm like, why not have one of my favorite songs that my favorite artist has released recently? And I kind of used that as inspiration. But a lot of it not necessarily has to be with the Easier to Love You, but more of the I'm With You song earlier that I mentioned. That mashup was really cool and different because it's 6/8, and usually most EDM songs are in 4/4. So I wanted to kind of capture that vibe instead, and kind of challenge myself to make something within that vein. But yeah, I definitely wanted to do something more slower and something, more like something calm, and instead of I wanted to have my usual kind of like progression of building up to a really big finish at the end, but I wanted the listener to have more of a quieter experience for most of the songs, since the entire album has kind of been pretty energetic up until this point. I wanted this song to kind of be that break and final satisfying resolution as well.
And it's a really beautiful way to end the album. It's just like this beautiful sense of resolve, especially with that key change in the second chorus. It does feel like really liberating and freeing. But yeah, there's like this one detail at the very end, because like the synth comes back again, but now it's like very, very distorted. Is it like supposed to be the apocalypse finally happening or something?
It's kind of like the ending section is, because it's kind of like swelling up into this final finale. I think having that distortion there kind of like puts everything into perspective, basically. And you could say that that kind of symbolizes like the apocalypse happening, or rather like I don't want to say for sure that it happened, but there's a lot of different imagery that pops in my head with that ending section, whether it be them escaping into space and seeing the earth explode, or them caressing in a room while the walls break down, like zombies coming or something like that, or they could see like the nukes coming down. Like there's all these different imagery that I had in mind when I had this ending, but nothing for sure I want to like say is it, you know what I mean? But all that kind of imagery was what I had in mind when I had that ending section kind of go off.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But yeah, it's basically, even though it's like there's no clear, definite vision, but the theme is just basically they're like spending their last moment together before everything crashes down, basically. Yes. Yeah. And Ellie Minibot does a fantastic job on this one. Her vocals are really soothing and comforting. And how did you like come across her, and lead to how did that like lead to her appearing on this song?
I'm trying to remember exactly where, but I do remember I feel like, oh man, I'm trying to remember who. Somebody I followed that worked on the album retweeted one of their songs, one of the things that they worked on with them. And at that point, I actually never heard of them before, and listening to their voice, it's like, ooh, this is super unique, and this is really comfy, and like I really liked their voice a lot. And I DM'd them and said, hey, would you be interested in working on this project I'm making? And they said yes. And I thought their voice would be perfect for like the closer of the album, and it ended up being like match made in heaven. Like they really found the vibe I was looking for, and their voice is just super unique and it's lovely to listen to. I'd love to work with them some more in the future, but yeah, just amazing vocalists for sure.
Yeah, it definitely does complement each other. It is indeed a match made in heaven. Alright, before we reach the conclusion, do you have, for the last time, do you have anything else you want to add about this song?
I don't know. I think enough has already been said about like everything I wanted to about it. It's just it's one of my favorite songs that I've made in a bit. And I always have a soft spot for like closers like this. So I wanted to make a song kind of with the vibe I was looking for, with the whole ending, just bittersweetness of it, and just kind of encapsulate that feeling that I wanted to for the whole album in general. So yeah, it's super satisfying to see everything kind of come together,
Yeah, we did it. We reached all 11 songs.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing? I know that talking for like 2 hours does like
Nah, dude, I like if it's something I'm passionate about, I can talk all day about it.
The magic of passion. Alright, so looking back on this whole album with all these songs, all these emotions, all these lyrics, what do you hope listeners take away from this album and its story?
I want them to when I listen to this album, I want them to be able to get immersed into it. I want them to let go and feel everything. But from the album itself, I just want them to just experience the story in however way they connect to it, and just if there's anything I want them to get away from this album, if there's anything I want them to leave this album with, is just don't be afraid to live life. Just live a little is what I'm trying to say.
Life is for living.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Be there in the moment.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I know you kind of spoiled this a bit in the beginning, but what should we expect from you next? Both on JOENN or anything else in general that you're preparing for?
So earlier this year, in February, I actually released a new song. It's kind of the intro song to my next project, which is how much do I want to say? So this next project is gonna be an album, and it's gonna be I feel like it's gonna be more along the lines of like vENERGY. It's gonna be more like aggressive and more just party oriented. It's gonna be really fun, and it's gonna be like a loose concept album. So it's just kind of be like, here's the theme, and we're just gonna kind of follow it. It's mostly just gonna be a song. It's mostly just gonna be an album just about the songs itself. So it's not gonna be anything too crazy. It's just gonna be just a bunch of songs that I made and had a lot of fun with. And that's gonna be in October. I'm gonna figure out the whole figure out the whole how I'm gonna announce that soon, because I'm gonna be releasing a single in July. Yes, in July. I'm gonna release a single in July, and then I'm gonna do a single a month after that, all the way up into October, and it's gonna be a new album. It's gonna be super exciting. It's definitely gonna be darker, so that's gonna be fun.
So it's like a sequel to vENERGY, basically.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of like that.
Yeah, and also just another thing, aside from the single Mine with Rizuri, you also did production work recently on a named Stay in the Rain, and that's like a really beautiful song. It kind of feels like a song that wouldn't feel out of place in vEMOTION, but you've also got these interesting rock touches from Unnamed.
Yeah, that song was really cool. That song has been in the works for, I want to say like half a year or so. It took a while to kind of get everything together, and working with through schedules and stuff. And yeah, it's just really cool to work with Unnamed after all this time, and finding out that Unnamed was like a really big fan of my work in general was really cool. I didn't know that. And they shared how my music helped them kind of continue singing and stuff, and really helped them kind of get them to where they are. And it was really kind of crazy to hear that. Yes. But yeah, working with Unnamed has been really, really cool, and we definitely have more stuff in the works. So it was a really cool project to work with them on.
Yeah, that's really sweet to hear. Yeah, and like vEMOTION does sound like an album that might help someone in some way. If vENERGY was just like letting loose, vEMOTION was just like this album that just tells you like it's okay to feel these emotions, but everything will be all right in the end. That's basically what you're getting at with this, right? Right. All right, so we're at the very end. Do you have any final parting words that you want to say to anyone who's listening, both familiar and unfamiliar with your work?
Anything I want to say? I guess thanks for giving JOENN a chance and everything. And this is kind of JOENN's kind of a bit of a passion project of mine, and I'm really really happy to see a lot of people are supporting it. And I hope you guys are excited for some future music coming out this year, and really excited to share with you guys everything I'm working on. It's gonna be really sick. Yeah, thanks again, man.
Yeah, no worries, and thank you so much for taking 2 hours out of the day just to talk about vEMOTION. This interview has been really great, and yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever you put out next. And yeah, yeah, hope to see you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. All right.